Okay, so we left off the last video having seen this example how to match two different arrays for the ID and try to extract values from the second one based on which value we're looking at in the first array. Now we're going to take this one step further now as well and look at when we have a nested array that we want to search through. So we're going to keep the first array as it is, but we're going to change this second array that we've been looking at to incorporate something a bit more complex. So let me just paste that here and we can have a look at that. So the first array is the same thing as we had before, but now we have a second and third array, and these contain both some distinct records each. So you can see that the IDs here are different for all of the different records that we've highlighted. Now the fourth array is a common selection of the two first ones. So this is a nested array, and you can see that the elements here are in turn arrays. So this would represent an even more complex structure. And I would just want to show you how to take the approach that we now looked at one step further so that we can actually apply this to an arbitrarily complex situation. So we have this code from before. We're going to have to slightly modify that to now work, but the principle is the same. We want to search through the two values that we have here and find the corresponding elements in this fourth array now, which is in turn nested. So how can we approach that problem? Well, we looked at this solution here, and really what we're trying to do, and if we just recap what we did, we took the first array, and for each element in this, we searched in the second array for a common element. Now, we can copy the general structure of this onto a new example. So let me just, I can keep the old code down here, but let me just print a new result here, and we'll just cut out the contents of this because we want to keep the first part. We still want to iterate over all the elements in the first array and do some logic here in the middle for how we can then find the second array. And what we're going to do is we're going to iterate over this fourth array and look at each element that we encounter. This is in turn going to be an array, and in each of those arrays we're going to look through the elements and try and find something that corresponds to the ID that we're looking for. So to do this concretely, we're going to define some variable, and I'm going to call this search array, because we're going to look at each element in the fourth array, which is in turn an array by itself, and we're going to, for each element in that, see whether or not it matches the original value. So for that, we would say that we begin with the fourth array, like that, and we send this in to an array.map function, because now we need to iterate over the two different arrays that we have in the fourth array here and look at the contents of those individually. So array.map, and then in here we would define a function, and let's say that the value this time is y, and that's going to be of the second type, but it's going to be an array. So second type array, because each element in fourth array here is one of these. So one of these guys is a second type array, as you can see here. Okay, so we have this, and what we want to implement for this function here would be, and I will indent this, we would take this value, and what we want to do with that is, this is in turn now one of these arrays, and we'll send that to the array try_find function. So array.try_find function, because for each of these individual arrays that we're now iterating through, we want to try and find something with the same index. Okay? And now we would define a function that takes another argument, let's say z in this case, like that, and this now would be just of the type second type. So we're digging through these arrays, you know. The first one here that we iterated over was the second type array, and now we're looking at the individual elements of this one array that we're looking at. Okay, and here we would have the same criteria as we had before. So we would look for z.id in this case, and we want that to be equal to x.id. And the reason why I have x.id here and not y is because we wanted to match the first array's element, right? So we have a matching criteria there, and after that we want to append this extra stuff that we had from before, where we extract just the extra field from our element. So once we found this, we're going to get one of these full records, and we just want the second part that contains sort of the data. So we would then use an option map, and then the mapping would be that we take this element and extract the extra variable. or the extra part of it. Okay, cool. So that should give us now an array of length 2 for each of these iterations that we do. So we iterate here, and we're going to do that 2 times before, because our first array has a length of 2. And in each of those iterations, we're going to look through the nested arrays here, which are also 2, and print a value for each one. Now, only one of these will contain the ID that we're looking for, so one of them is inevitably going to come out as being empty. So in order to see what this one looks like during the course of evaluation, let's put in a print statement as well. So print fn, and then we'll just say array, and then okay, and then we'll put in the search array there. Okay, so that should give us some transparency. And what we want to do then is we want to find the first element that is actually populated here. Before I do that, let's maybe execute this to see what we have so far. So let me, well, we can comment this line out. I just want to get rid of some of the old code from before, like that. And now let's execute this. So we're only returning finally a value of 1s here, but I'm only looking for this print statement. So you can see the intermittent arrays that we're getting as we're looping through this in a nested way. And what you're going to find is that for each array, there's one element that's none and one element that actually has something in it. The reason for that is we're searching through, so we can see that here. This has some and then a value, and then this has none. The reason for that is we're searching through these 2 arrays that are nested in the big one. And we know that if we have a particular ID, that will only exist in one of these arrays. So for the other one, we're naturally not going to find anything. And that's why we get a none value here. Okay, cool. So the next thing we want to do is we want to take these arrays and we just want to extract the first element that actually has something in it. And we already know how to do that from before. So I'm going to define a new variable. First sum is what I'm going to call it. Like this. And we are going to say that we take the search array for this and we send it into array.tryfind. And we used this in the previous video as well. So try find. Okay. And what do we want to put in here? We want to put a function that takes some argument, let's call it x. And what we want to find is that x is not none. So whenever that criteria is met, we're going to extract the first element. So for each one of these, let's pick the second example here. When we see this, the criteria is not met, so we keep searching. And then we get to this one, and we're going to see that it's an element, so we're going to return it. Now, this will wrap it in another option type because of the way this try find is performed. So in order to get rid of that, we just don't want 2 sums at the same time. We would get like sum of j. And in order to get rid of that, we would send this into just the option.flatten function. So .flatten, like that. And it removes any nesting of these sort of sum or none statements that we have. Okay, and well, since I defined this as a variable, let me just return that as the final statement as well to make sure that our array is actually a valid array. And then in the end, I'm going to print the array as well. Okay. So this should now be a fully functional code. And we're going to execute it and see whatever we get now. We would expect that the search array looks like before, but then we would expect that in the final array here, we just extract the one element of each iteration that is actually a value. And if we look at these arrays, we can see that the 2 intermediate arrays here have the same structure as before. But the final array, this result here that we print in the end, comes out to be sum I, sum j. And if we look what we did now, we search for the IDs 1 and the IDs 2 in this nested array here that contains these 4 elements. And we were able to find, first, that ID 1 here corresponds to an extra value of I. That's the first value we can see in the output here. And then for the second one here with ID 2, we found that here in the other array and associated that with a value of j. So that's how you can extract something from nested arrays as well using the same functionality. So this is kind of pushing it a bit in terms of complexity. I know this is a lot of code in this example, but hopefully that shows you how to also generalize the concepts that we've seen. So thanks a lot for watching this one, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.